Now JSP, okay, when you say HTML plus Java code, which becomes JSP. In the previous example, like in the previous in the module that is servlets, how many files you have to write to execute a servlet? You have to write 3 files minimum, correct? What are they? They are your HTML code, your web.xml and Java file, correct? Now the next technology of a servlet is JSP. What they did is they removed everything, they said, why I should write 3 files? I'll write only 1 file. See, the UI portion is in HTML, Java portion, the business logic is in Java file. Why don't I combine these two? Okay, now HTML and Java file is combined, and you need not write web.xml. So all the 3 files are merged into a single file that is called as JSP. JSP stands for Java Server Pages. Okay, so like the Java has got .java extension, .xml as the XML for the XML file. JSP has got the .jsp as the extension. Okay, so see, JSP is nothing but a servlet only. You will come to know in a short while what is JSP. Right? The JSP file has to be executed on the server, right? Either application server or web server. The web server is like Apache Tomcat, okay, and application servers are, yeah, a couple of application servers are WebLogic, WebSphere, JBoss, Glassfish, all these things, right? Okay, now okay, so JSP is also a server-side code, hence it has to be on one of the server, either application server or web server, right? The next point is that, see, as I said, servlet has to write 3 files. One is HTML file, web.xml and Java file. So what the next technologists have done is they removed everything, they made a single file, that is combining HTML and JSP, Java file, which is becoming JSP. Okay, so that means JSP will have both HTML and Java code. Okay, then what is the purpose of JSP? If you look here, HTML, the purpose of HTML is for display purpose, like you can write a form, the fields, okay. UI purpose, you can use HTML. Java is used for business logic, that is what project you want to develop, what the code it should contain, right? And Java can connect to the database. Okay, now so JSP is used for multi-purpose, both for UI as well as the middle layer, right? Completely end-to-end. See, if you just have JSP, you can develop end-to-end project, right? Front end you can develop, middle tier you can develop, using JDBC you can connect to the database and get everything. So if you know JSP, you can do complete project. Okay, but right now in the industry, JSP is used for UI, user interface. Predominantly it is used for user interface. Even JSF is in the market, okay, which is like something very similar to Struts. It follows the MVC architecture, but JSF is more of a front end. Okay, now let's look at how exactly the JSP is getting compiled, right? So what is JSP file? How does it compile? When you compile, what happens? Okay, now I will develop a file called hello.jsp. Now if I compile the JSP, what it generates is, there is a JSP compiler, what it generates is, it generates a servlet file for me. So that means So a JSP file is a servlet file only. Rather than writing three files and writing a complicated code, we are writing JSP. So when I write the JSP, it gets compiled to a servlet file only. Okay, that servlet file is again what file? It is Java file only. Correct? If you look at like generic, so generic servlet, HTTP, derive the class from a generic servlet or HTTP servlet, etc. Right? Now, if I compile Java C and that Java file, what it does is it generates a .class file for me. The .class file gets loaded into the memory and it is executed. Right? So when you again I'll explain. Right? JSP file. If you compile JSP, if you by using JSP compiler, it gets converted to a servlet file. Okay, so that servlet file is a Java file. That Java file has to be compiled, and finally it gets into .class file. Okay. Now, if you look at the detailed, the execution procedure, that is what I said. JSP file using JSP translator, it converts into the servlet file, that is .java file. Okay, Java file is compiled and it generates .class file. The .class file is loaded into the memory and executed by JRE. Okay, and that is how JSP gets executed. Okay. Okay, advantages of JSP over HTML. Okay, so basically these are the advantages of JSP. As in servlet, you need not write the code separately for HTML and Java separately. You can combine both of them. Okay, so if you look at the servlet is only for a business logic, right? What project has to be done has to be specified in servlets. Whereas in JSP, right, you can use it for front end also, that is UI or user interface, right? As it has HTML file and the business logic as it has Java file. JSP is a combination of HTML and Java. If you look at the complexity, right? So writing servlets is little complex when compared to JSP, because I'll show you in a short while. Writing JSP is very easy, extremely easy. Right? Okay, the next topic is the dynamic compilation. I'll show you practically. That is, okay, what happens first time when I write a servlet, right? I compile it, okay, and run it. So if I want to modify, let's say I have modified this servlet file, again I have to compile it, bring down the Apache Tomcat, then bring up Apache Tomcat and then run the program, because the .class file has to be loaded on the server. Okay, then only it is available. Then only server can execute that and give it to the client. Okay. Okay. Now JSP is not like that. If you write once, okay, it gets loaded and executed. If you modify, you need not bring down the server and all those things. Just refresh the browser. That's enough, right? So it's a dynamic compilation. At runtime, it gets compiled. Okay. So JSP is used for 3-tier architecture and 2-tier architecture. So the 3-tier architecture means that you have a front end, middle layer and back end layer. What do you mean by front end? The user interface, what will be displayed to the user. For example, I'm creating a Gmail account. So I will be given a form to fill up the details, first name, last name, everything. That is a front end. The middle layer is the logic of the project. The logic of the project. Okay. And the backend is, the last layer is the backend layer, that is the database. Now if you look at the 2-tier architecture, that is what happens, you will combine the front end and the business logic in the single layer itself. You will not have a separate layer, right? Then you have the backend layer as the database. Okay. So usually industry does not support, does not recommend two-tier architecture, because it becomes your front-end layer and the business logic or the project layer is very tightly coupled, right? So if I just want to modify one screen, it is only in a single layer. Okay, rather I have a separate module for each operation. It is more easy to develop, right? So because if you combine both, we don't know if we modify UI, it may impact the business logic also. We may be using the same code also, same file itself, right? Okay, then we have something called model view controller. The model is for the data, right? It could be the business logic data, it could be the data stored at the backend, right? Okay, so you have your business logic and the data can be part of model. The view is what is displayed to the user, right? And the controller is that you will have a centralized control. Okay, now if you look at model view or controller architecture in our servlets, which is like in a controller? Can you tell me which is a controller in our architecture? Yeah, I'm talking about a servlet. If you look at model, right, Kumar, you're right. Which is the controller? See, if in a servlet, okay, model view controller, model is the data and the business logic, right? And the view is for the what to display, and controller is the portion which controls where what has to go. If this is a URL, this has to go. If this is the one, this has to go, right? Which file has the redirection mechanism? If this is a URL, execute this servlet name and servlet class for me. If this is a URL, this is a servlet class which needs to be executed. Which is that file? That is web.xml, correct? That's a controller, okay? It controls the project or a program, right? Okay, what is a three-tier architecture? Why do we need it? Okay, in your, okay, I'll answer this, then I'll ask you the question about Eclipse. Let's say what Annie has to say. In three-tier architecture, we have a presentation tier which represents information to the user, that is the front-end layer. The logic tier, here we make logical decisions and perform basic computation. It is a logic tier which transfers data between presentation tier and data tier where information is stored. Three-tier architecture increases performance, scalability. Okay, now let's look at, see in the servlet, we have in the life cycle of a servlet, we have three methods, that is init, service and destroy. The init method is called when the servlet is loaded into the memory, and for every request from the user, the service method is called, and just before service is servlet is removed from the memory, the destroy method is called. Now see, if you look at JSP, when you compile JSP, when using JSP translator, okay, or JSP compiler itself is there. Okay, it converts to a servlet file. So that means JSP is also something very similar to servlet. There is no difference. It is just for combining HTML file and Java file, and couple of more facilities JSP is introduced, right? So now you have JSP init, that is whenever the JSP is loaded into the memory, first time it gets executed. It is like constructor for JSP. The next thing is JSP underscore JSP service. It is basically used when any request is received from the client, and just before JSP is removed from the memory from application server or web server, then you call JSP destroy, right? It is absolutely the same, right? You need not write these methods, but it is automatically done. It is automatically called, right? Now let's look at, right? See, now if you look at the servlet, okay, how are you creating a project in a servlet? You're creating a dynamic project, okay? So you're not creating just a plain Java project. You are dynamic web project you are creating. So you have to create something very similar to that, and you have to create the same in JSP also, because this is also a web programming. Now, when you will have directories like src, web content, webinf, lib, all these directories will be there. Now, the JSP files, okay, I will compare the servlet and JSP. So you have three files, right, in servlet. One is HTML file, the web.xml file, and the Java file, right? The HTML file will have the UI, which is placed in web content directory. Web.xml will be the controller, which says if this is the URL which servlet class should be executed. That should be placed in webinf directory. If you look at the src, that is Java file, that is like, if you derive a class from HTTP servlet, you have do, get, do, post, all those methods are there, right? So you can get it, like you have to put it in src directly, those Java files. Now all the files are combined into one file as JSP file. The HTML, web.xml, all those things are combined into one class, one file, that is .jsp file. That JSP file has to be placed under web content directory, right? So what you have to do is, after writing your JSP file, click on the JSP file, right click on it, you select as run as, okay, then specify run on server. What exactly it does, whichever the server is attached with the Eclipse, either Tomcat or Glassfish or WebLogic or WebSphere, anything, it runs on it, right? Okay. And one more thing is, okay, I'll show you. Okay, what you have is in Eclipse, you go to Windows. Actually, you have an option of choosing where your web output should be displayed, right? You can select the internal browser, you can select the external browsers like IE, Safari, Opera, everything. But only for that you have to configure. Make sure that you are in Java EE perspective, right? Okay, I want to ask you one more question, fundamental question. That is, everybody installs the Java Eclipse in J2EE mode, right? I'm sure it is yes for everyone. Okay. Wow. Okay. Otherwise, your servlets, your many web programming doesn't work. Okay, so how exactly you have to do is so many JSPs are there. Before that, go to Windows, okay, web browser, right? I can select which are the options I want, right? If I want to, let's say I have one file, okay, this JSP is there, okay, I want to run this, which browser I have selected, Windows, web browser, Google Chrome, right? So when I say run on server, so it opened Chrome for me and it will show, hey, Apache Tomcat is working. Now Tomcat is loading into the memory. Then your JSP file gets deployed on the web server. See here, it's loading over here. Okay, now let's look at, I can modify the browser to internal browser. That is, it will not launch any external browser, right? Okay, now let me stop Apache Tomcat. Now I'll run it. The Tomcat is being loaded. There should be an internal browser in Eclipse itself. See here, it's loading. It is not opening any web browser outside, right? Okay, why exactly use internal browsers? When you are developing the code, right? You will not every time switching over to another browser, right? It is very time consuming and you have to say alt tab, control tab and all. So to avoid seeing your code in two places, you use the internal browser. Okay, now let's move on. That's what it is. Okay. How will you add a new browser? You say Windows, Preferences, go to this, go to General, okay, Web Browser, okay, and click on New and specify the name of the browser, location where the exe file for Windows, for that browser is stored, and click on OK. Right? So I repeat, go to Windows, go to Preferences, go to General, the first option itself, then go to Web Browser, then click on Add. You can add the browsers like IE, Safari, everything. Okay, please try adding couple of browsers. Right? If you want to know where exactly the browser is stored, you can type Chrome. Okay, then select that, right click on it, look at the properties, it will show you where exactly the chrome.exe is stored, right? So like that, you can just copy and paste the whole entire stuff into the Eclipse, right? Okay, now let's move on. Okay, so we have three kind of tags in JSP, that is scriptlet to write the Java code, the declarative to declare the attributes and methods, and expression, it is like out.println, right? We have system.out.println. In JSP we have out.println. Okay, the same thing as out.println in the servlets, right?